living for stuff. It's like I was
Yeah, I guess we can get started here. We just want to welcome everyone again here to our third member Q&A session. For those who joined us previously in the past, thank you for joining this session again. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be posted on our webpage. Um, just like on any other forums that we have had previously, this is an open forum, so we're just going to provide some quick updates on DL of what's happening out in industry and what we're seeing right now. And then we'll jump into the open forum for everyone to kind of just share their thoughts, concerns, questions that you may have going forward. So just a bit of an update onto the dedicated locator project updates. So in this slides, our DL projects are now active and also currently happening, and what are in imminent and upcoming stages. Not a huge amount of transition and seeing more projects come into what's currently happening since our last update on the previous session. Most of this imminent side are still going through the initial 90-day setup phase. They're all very close to being active dedicated locator projects, and we do expect them to be in the currently happening section of this list in the upcoming month. There are also multiple projects from the existing telecom projects that we are still currently working with to transition them over and bring them all to from the legacy DL setups to the new legal model. So there's a lot of those that you are seeing come around to your side of things where we're sending out project acknowledgement to existing projects from these telecoms. Like I said, we're transitioning them to the new legal model. On the upcoming list here is pretty much stable in terms of those who have shown interest, but are still, not necessarily move forward or coming on board. It could be that there's just preliminary conversations, gathering resources and whatnot. I'm speaking on to going over to the dedicated locator side of things. Now we'll go into by numbers in terms of dedicated locator requests. So what we have seen, the numbers continue to increase in the total amount of requests coming through under the DL model. Last month in May, we saw almost 3 times to what we saw in the same month of last year. So you can see the numbers here from May of last year, we have 3,024. Through this year, we had 8,890. So once again, that's 3 times more to what we are seeing comparable to last year. So it is a steady increase in what we're seeing out there and greater usage. So what we're expecting towards the end of the year is that we should surpass the 100,000 requests going to Ontario One Call system that are directly related to dedicated locator as more project owners move into dedicated locator models and as more resources become available. So this is the past 12-month worth of data. So this is a good snapshot to what we have seen in the last year. Speaking of the build where it was passed last year of April and to where we started gathering data, this data set itself from last year, June 2022 to May 2023. So we have a full set of data on a full year. We can see where the most prominent region that dedicated locator is most active on is in York region, Durham, and Peel. And this is mainly, due to fiber to home projects that are currently existing or currently happening within those areas and utilizing the dedicated locator model. So just kind of touching base on that previous slide to those regions, we can see the top 10 project owners that we have seen in the dedicated locator model. Some of these are on the existing model, some are still in the transition moving over from the legacy to the new legal model. But you can see topping off the chart there, we have two telecoms that are strongly putting great use of dedicated locator model and transitioning over most of their projects that have existing legacy models to the new legal model of dedicated locator. So in terms of DLSP, the availability we broken down into active DLSPs and those who are close and those who are looking into getting to the market. So on the left side there, we see active DLSP that are currently in DL projects. These are all DLSPs that I've listed here that are boots on the ground. So meaning they have gone through the whole 90-day process. They've gone through with a project owner, have established service agreements and have mapping for their project specific, and are now currently locating for these projects. Now on the right side here, we have LSPs who are close. So we have these lists that are currently going through the 90-day process and kind of going through those preliminary conversations and conversation to have with affected members within their respective projects or respected areas. So they're very close into being active, and we suspect them to have that completion in the next month or so once they completed their 90-day setup point and having them over as an active DLSP. Now, this is a great, this is a great sign that we can see here where resources are slowly becoming available and more are coming through in terms of resources available for multiple project owners. As per our previous sessions, there is a high interest of dedicated locator, but also, the resources are we are still working industry wide in terms of opening up some of these sources and having that eligibility across the board here. We also have several of the LSPs down here where they have the interest and we have had those preliminary conversation. So these are, the upcoming LSPs that have shown a strong interest on their dedicated locator, have been having those preliminary conversation to some of these members of their affected within their affected project limits. So some of these we're looking to see if, going through the formalized process with a project owner submitting their notices and kind of going through the whole steps already within the 90-day setup. Next up, what we want to share here with you is a bit of a marketing side of our dedicated locator here on Ontario One Call. So you can see there we do have a new logo that have been sharing around now regarding dedicated locator, and what you see on the board here is actually a banner that we're looking to provide to large projects that are under the dedicated locator model right now, such as Bell Canada fiber to home install sites where you may see some of these under fencing. What we would like to get is more visibility out there of dedicated locator on site. And it's a good way for owners of underground infrastructure or project owners to show their support of dedicated locator. So if anyone anyone else has a project where this would be appropriate or has an idea where we would be able to put up some signage like this, please do let me know. Or if anyone has any comments or feedback, we're certainly open to that. But yeah, definitely something that we want to start sharing out there to a lot of our sites that are under the dedicated locator model. So just touching base, it was a quick update that we have there for dedicated locator from the previous sessions that we have had. Essentially, this is an open forum for everyone. So I just wanted to kind of touch base to some of the frequently asked questions that we come across in the past session and conversation we have had since then. First thing that we're coming across more often is what is the new DL model intended to fix in comparison to the legacy model or going to the public stream. So with the new legal DL model, it's a new way, innovative step forward in delivering locate efficiently, on time, eliminating delays into construction due to late locates, right? It also promotes safe dig practice with having a single resource made available to any given time for the project, to provide or have clarity on locate markings. So with that sense, you do have that single resource available when and where that project is required to have that locate. So there's a lot more flexibility on a project side of things in completing their project on time by having locates available and readily marked on the field there for the safety aspect of things. Comparable to any previous version of Dedicated Locator, to which it was voluntary by members. So with that being said, the timeline of having completed valid locate can still fall out of alignment, and having some utilities under deal and some utilities still go under the public stream. It really didn't fall through in terms of having a set straight of valid locate on hand, and it still was causing delays for larger projects. So with the new deal model, all affected members within the prescribed project limits have legal requirements to agree upon a DLSP and to provide locates, and for that DLSP to provide locate service for that project. Touching base again to what kind of projects is DL intended to be used for, I'm going to pluck this right out to the legislation. This section applies with, this one directly applies from the legislations between the three that are eligible right now: a designated broadband project, an excavation or a dig project that satisfies such criteria, and may be prescribed by the ministry. Once again, under excavation or dig project for which project owner chooses to use dedicated locator. So like, they on a voluntary basis to be on a dedicated locator for their project to use the greater use to it. Another two questions that we want to come across with, we have frequently asked questions: how will the new deal model impact, administrative burden and costs? Well, there is some additional administrative work initially when setting up DL. We all understood that we are all coming across that industry-wide, including ourselves and our team here. However, as we proceed and get more dedicated locate service provider on board, more projects coming on board, this initial progression, this initial service agreement, or process and steps of onboarding a DLSP will taper down, because the use of the same DLSP will be used for other projects as well too. So that DLSP may already have the service agreement, or may already have the mapping from previous project that have come across within your location there. So only time will provide that where it tapers down in the administrative burden. But what we want to do here is that in general focus needs to be taken to, this will, yes, initially this will cost additional burden operationally, but it is going to remove the cost from the member that otherwise are unbudgeted for these external capital projects. So overall, it saves the cost for you as a member, initially going through the initial burden of setting this up. But once that's been set forward and DL has provided their own resources to take that out of your own budget itself, or to your own capital costs. Another question that we come across with is the utility owners with their own locators on staff. Now, so this is very common. So this is what we have come across most often. Most members may have already faced some of the brunt of the fiber builds or major capital builds, and they weren't unable to keep up or recognize the benefits of the DL program. So we've seen a few, however, like that were able to keep up with the locates, but really they were only able to keep up because their exposure were very limited to to the area where their infrastructure was located. So hence the reason why that member may not be affected directly. But in general, as a member, you're paying for your own internal locator to locate on someone else's capital build, and this isn't good use of your capital budget, I guess, or in terms of your money for in terms of fundings for your own parts ways in terms of your project. So if a project's coming through that they're providing their own resource, you don't have to come across your own resource to send out your own locator. It does not go into the public stream, so therefore the notification it's not towards to you in terms of member being responsible responding to that locate within the 5 business days. So there's compliance aspect to that. This project owners will take on all that burden, and the DLSP will take all that load away from the public side of away from that member. So and essentially, dedicated locator will resolve that heavy load and burden from that particular member, even if they are providing their own locator on staff. So those are just some of the questions that we've come across with and frequently asked questions. Now, this is a part where I'm just going to leave it as an open forum. If you have any questions, feedback, or experience that you want to share, this is your time to shine. Just feel free to unmute yourself. Also on the webinar here on the top corner, you'll able to see a Q&A button. If you're not able to, unmute yourself and provide your question, you can just type it in there, and one of our team members will read out your questions or any of your feedbacks. Okay, we got a quiet group here. Oh, we do have one there. Helen, go ahead.
Hi, Helen is from TTC Restructure. I think as last ministry as a consultation meeting, we already raised the question like TTC structure, are unique, right? Different from other utility. We still discuss this one with OneCo right now. Yes. My point is, we have, TTC have a separate process like technical review that's connected with the city's permits process, right? So any as a construction work, big scale work, they will come into TTC to do technical review. In that review, we will we will ask a developer to carry out a survey of TTC structure. It will be back and first. When they finish a survey, and the TTC will review and approve that survey. However, as compared with the dedicated locator, right, the process. So if we provide a map to dedicated locator, but they only provide a markup, I don't think that's sufficient and safe for TTC to say, they can proceed the work, right? Anyway, because this dedicated locator is not a permit process, right? It's only provide the information. In terms of, provide the information, that did one, dedicated locator reached me, ask for, information of TTC. We would like to provide the information, but however, right now, we don't have that detail, what kind of information, to provide them. I did ask the guy, what kind of information you want, what kind of format, how you're gonna to locate the TTC structure, use what kind of tool, what's the time, frame. I asked all the questions, but already a few weeks passed, he haven't replied to me yet. But then yes, also yes, that's one we also discussed with OneCo, if we provide a simple coverage map, in our opinion, that's not enough to carry out any locates for structure, right, specifically. And also, if they do want to carry out a survey, substructure, that map is not enough. So they have to reach out TTC to get more detailed construction record or anything. In that term, TTC always have to sign non-disclosure agreement, and that relate to a lot of confidential information, right? So this kind of still need a discussing, in detail with us,
Yeah, so it still works hand in hand. So the permitting process, obviously that's through the project that's coming across your area. It still remains the same process. Just like in a municipality, when a dedicated locator comes across there, the locate portion is completely separated to, a project permit going into their area there and proceeding, to do their project and get the right proper permit on your land or your TTC right of way, right? So that portion still remains to the project owner to go through the proper process that TTC have is set in place. Now, in terms of dedicated locator providing information for them to safely locate your infrastructure, Well, that's something that has to be worked between the DLSP and the member itself to based on, in most cases that what we're seeing here, in most cases that's coming across is that they are regional basis. So meaning, a project fiber to home. I'm giving an example here for Rogers that's coming all across um, York region or the Toronto region there. They don't have a Pacific project area directly at initial submission, but they are going to be using dedicated locator to the region itself. And once it gets so closer there, or they may have further information closer to time, that's something the member and the project owner or the DLSP can kind of have that set in place with their agreement to provide more accurate detailed mapping to where the location is, and from that point an internal process from your end to provide what mapping is required for that entity to locate your infrastructure safely, right? Um, like I said, it goes back to that agreement between the member and the DLSP to configure what will be the best possible way to locate your infrastructure properly and what mapping is required based on the project need. Mapping wise will just be between the project owner and the member to provide at that point. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, can I say this is not mandatory? Yes, we have to follow, must provide something. We still, let's say, except this permit process, we still have a TPUCC process, right? The TPUCC process is also an engineering review process. Look into the, all the utility work into very detail and from engineering point of view, right? A lot of this utility company already get, our, review and approve some of TTC, some of on their utility work already. Can we say this one don't have to go through the, one code again? This is a kind of a duplication, right? If they already get, for example, Toronto Water already, have a big project to lay the pipe anything, but this already went through TTC review. TTC is signed off on this work already, reviewed by TTC, all parties already, right? So that's why if because that's happen in different stage, right? In TPCC review, that's like a design stage, already done very detailed. The drawing already provided very detailed information, right? So when come to construction, if based on this one, they still have to locate, they still have to dedicate locate. That's for us, it seems like a duplication,
Yeah, hello, Helen. I just want to step in here. So, excuse me, Marco. I just want to clarify a few things. So, just going back to the discussion that TTC and Ontario One Call did have. So, we didn't state that you needed to supply coverage mapping. It was more you needed to provide mapping that is appropriate, like Marco was saying, that the locator is able to locate your infrastructure safely and appropriately. And I know that obviously you showed us some of your mapping and you talked through the process that you have at TTC, and obviously doing the engineering side of things, that is very good. But it is mandatory still. So I think I heard you say, and sorry if I misheard, but I think I heard you say that it wasn't mandatory for TTC, but it is mandatory for TTC to participate in Dedicated Locator and come to an agreement on the use of a dedicated locating service provider and provide them with the mapping that they do require in order to mark your infrastructure safely. And although there may be some duplication in your eyes, obviously the engineering side of things, that is your process, and then what's needed by the project owner and the dedicated locator to complete their side and make sure that they are marking and performing their functions correctly and safely. Obviously, that is their process on their side. So I appreciate the fact that you do see the engineering side as a safer way of going about things, but that is just one component in the construction industry, and obviously the other components do need to be followed if they are in the legislation, such as dedicated locator.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I understand that one. I think we still have more discussion on this term, right? Because we do, really wondering, what kind of information we should provide it, right? Right now we don't have that detail, the one. Definitely we will provide a different thing, from a utility, So because the utility mapping, they just give a promised location. For example, they have a cable and the sidewalk, right? They don't have to give very accurate. This one is away from the curb, 1 meter or 2 meter, right? Because you have a device, instrument to physically detect this cable there. But for the structure, you must have a mapping very accurate, all this survey data, then allow this survey dedicated locator to do this one. Otherwise, they cannot do. Then to survey the subway location, that's really complicated, TTC nowadays give this one to, anyone to do only locates, and the TTC always will review, back in the first and approve. Then they can use this data to do construction work. But this is a different process. I think we still have more discussing, later. For me right now, I just want to understand, if, already, in TTC, some work already, TTC already reviewed, one can exempt this project, or still have to do again. If they already reviewed TTC, or they already did the TTC survey everything, TTC approved, through the city permits process, and the TPUCC, review already TTC sign off on the work already.
Yeah, as I say, I think you mentioned we do have another, some more conversation to have, but obviously how you go through your process in getting those engineering drawings drawn up is obviously the process for TTC. You do need to find a way in which to provide some form of mapping, whether that be engineering drawings or however it is, to the dedicated locate service provider so that they can produce those locates. So that's the task that obviously we need to come together and work on. There is no exemption in this situation, so that's something that the DL team and TTC can work on, but it does need to be looked at and obviously put into practice.
Yes, TTC can provide this one. Yeah, for all this developer, even TPUCC, if they needed this information, we always direct them to TTC, document control, and before the sign non-disclosure agreement, they can access all information TTC has. Yeah.
Okay, great. We do have a question from the Q&A section from Richard Wanick asking, how are infrastructure owners sharing records with project owners? Is there a standard process for software?
So there isn't, just to answer this, there's really no standard process for that. It is a discussion and an agreement that could be set in place with the DLSP and the member to however way you can translate that mapping for the dedicated locator to receive that, and obviously to locate it accurately and safely for your infrastructure. So it's something that you would have to discuss with the onboarding DLSP to what type of platform mapping that you may have for your records, whether or not it's, just like what Adam mentioned earlier, whether or not if it's, however form of GIS, or if it's a drawn up for a PDF or engineering drawing. As long that the DLSP is able to read it and receive the information to accurately locate your infrastructure, that's more than enough what's required for, for in terms of providing the mapping for records.
Great, thank you, Marco. There is another question as well from Steve Reedman. When does the clock start on the 10-day mapping request deadline for the infrastructure owners?
So from the notification that we send out for a project acknowledgement, the 10 days there's initially acknowledging that, the DLSP is set on hand, and also the project information of the DL. That's the initial agreement that you will go into to confirm that you'll be working with the project owner and the DLSP at that point. Now, in terms of the mapping, it's understandable between when that could be translated with, whether or not it's, it's a system that the DLSP may already have, or something they have to obtain. So that timeline is not quite defined. Essentially, that's what the 90-day is for, is that it gives that ample of time for, all parties involved to set up whatever requirements required to safely locate the infrastructure within the project's area there. So within that, it's, the 10-day, it's essentially going to agreeing to the dedicated locate service provider. Industry-wise, it's understandable that the mapping may not be provided right away within that 10 days. So as long as you are communicating that with the DLSP and the project owner, if it requires to have an alternative timeline, then that's something you need to agree upon with, and the project owner need to agree upon with an alternative timeline for you to provide that mapping. But essentially, it's recommended to have that timeline within the 90-day setup process before the start date.
We have another question from Rob Matthews in the chat and the Q&A. Has Ontario One Call looked at providing a DL request level between the single street or subdivision requests, I think that's the project request, and the regional areas?
Yeah, Rob, did you wanted to come on the call here to kind of just expand that a little bit with that question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my question's specific to projects because, as you know, telecoms are doing very specific projects, and some of them bridge areas and include two separate areas where we may only be doing a single house bridging into a separate area, costing utilities an entire new DL admin fee to do a single house. So, I mean, obviously from a project level, you can roll that into the cost, but that seems a little atrocious if you look at the idea of having to pay an entire admin fee for a single house service. So hence my question about having this hybrid or intermediary version of a DL request to allow for a specific project area to be identified at the request level, so that one call can determine who the utilities are who would be impacted by the specific project area, and not have to put the LSPs through an arduous process of having to find out who actually would be impacted when they won't necessarily be impacted by a specific project in a dedicated locator area.
Hi, Rob. So I'm going to jump in here, and certainly I've heard similar suggestions in how we can set up the use of dedicated locator, and having the request into Ontario One Call. And obviously it is something that we do get many projects of various sizes, and it is something that we do need to continue to look into. Right now we're obviously in a situation where we haven't reached stabilization in the industry. As such, it's quite difficult to really know the best way to go forward, but certainly this is something that we are looking at, and looking at how we can incorporate it into dedicated locators. So it's a great piece of feedback, and certainly it's something that if it looks like it'll be beneficial to the dedicated locator world, then it is something that we will introduce.
Thank you, Adam. We have another question from the Q&A from Jeff Votemans. It's recommended by Ontario One Call for the infrastructure owner to enter into an agreement with the DLSP. There was a template created and sent to us. Question here is, can we add anything in there we deem important, and what if you can't come to an agreement, especially regarding damages, integrity of the infrastructure, etc.?
Very great question there, Jeff. To start off with your first question there, yes, definitely the draft agreement that was provided to you, that's just a foundation of once again, it's a draft agreement. So it does hold, the main foundation that would be required, typically what you would see in a service agreement between a member and a locate service provider, with the exception of that, in this case, it's towards a dedicated locate project. So it's just specific for that project itself, not to an entire public area itself. So to answer that, you can definitely add whichever, added information that you do require within the agreement to however you need to locate your infrastructure, certain process escalations and whatnot. Those are all additional based on member specific. So that's definitely something that you can add on to your agreement. Now, when it comes to between the DLSP and the member obviously coming to an agreement, there is some cases where a mediation are required at that point if there's no agreement that can come across to it. Sometimes it could be a simple third party just needs to be in between that to kind of just understand between both parties what the agreements have set in place or what the pinning points based on those agreements, and if we can come into a resolution. But the end of it is that the member, the project owner, and the DLSP must come into a solution and come into an agreement based on that. So there has to be some way of a form of solution towards to it, and can't just be one way or another to set into dedicated locator. And to answer the damages integrity, obviously, when we speak of agreements, liability is a big, it's a big concern based on that. All right. So what we're looking at here is the, and our part here that we don't have any oversight on it. It doesn't fall upon our legislation based on the liability, but the liability level is based on each responsible party. What I mean by that is that each responsible party, meaning there is a liability responsibility to a member providing most accurate updated mapping for that DLSP to locate their infrastructure safely. There's a liability level that comes across the DLSP who receives that mapping, whether or not it's accurate and whatnot from the member, to locate that infrastructure to their best capability and the best information that they have on hand there. And then obviously another separate level of liability comes across to the project owner and their contracted subcontractors of excavating and following the locate markings and whatnot. So that kind of goes all in hand based on liability. So in terms of putting that in the terms of into an agreement, it can get convoluted, but there could be works around to it, whether or not it has to have the involvement between the project owner or it can be just directed to a DLSP, but some way or form or another, these liabilities are distributed between each individual responsible parties that may incur that damage.
Great, thank you. There's another question here in the Q&A from Neha Kanjar. Are DL agreements expected to be executed for each project / multiple projects, or blanket agreements for the entire zone? If blanket agreements are expected or requested, how would utility owners know where each of the LSPs are completing locates for various projects in the zone? Is there a notification process through Ontario One Call?
So the notification process starts off with the project acknowledgement. So the project acknowledgement and the confirmation of green light. So the confirmation of green light is when we activate and provide the DL ID to that specific project, and the dedicated locator program has been set up for that specific area. We provide that notification and track record to each individual member. Now, as you see these project acknowledgement, and also if you've seen these green lights, there are specific DL project numbers on them, and there are specific DL IDs, contractor IDs, sort of say in current language that we speak of right now. The DL IDs host those specifically for those excavators or projects that are particularly on that project. Now, in terms of the agreement, that agreement is a service agreement. So that service agreement is based upon the dedicated locate service provider that's coming on board within those locations. So whether or not it's the same entity or the same dedicated locate service provider, but now they're on a different project, or so they're in a different project but still the same area. Technically, you do not have to have that service agreement again because it's the same DLSP. That service agreement is really for them, in terms of locating your infrastructure properly, whatever stipulation you put into your agreement based on safely locating your infrastructure, in terms of escalations and whatnot, those are all stipulated in there. But if they already have that signed over initially, then you can just carry on with their other project coming on board within that same servicing area. So in terms of blanket agreement, it only works based on per DLSP. And in terms of agreement, I mean, in terms of tracking the notification and whatnot, you can keep that track from their acknowledgement and also our green light based on the project numbers.
Thanks, Marco. This appears to be all we have in the Q&A at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And there's also just kind of following up, Rebecca Malholm on the question that Richard had, is to confirm if the infrastructure owner can dictate that platform for the mapping. It's really a collaborative between the member and the dedicated locator service provider, hence the reason why we recommend that you have that discussion with the dedicated locator service provider, right? To however way is best for them to receive that on their end for your record. If you have a current existing platform, if you do require to have them certain access, then perhaps there may be a separate NDAs or agreement that they have to sign over to gain access for that particular mapping and whatnot, or whether or not you want to print that out as a PDF, or just like what Adam mentioned there, as an engineering drawing. As on the DLSP is comfortable and they are okay to locate that infrastructure safely based on the mapping, then that's more than what they require.
Hey, Marco.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Wes from Execulink Telecom. Good afternoon. One other question further to that, with regards to the, I guess, ongoing relationship, because you've got basically three parties involved. You've got the project owner, the dedicated locator, service provider, and then the infrastructure or the member, right? And so it seems to me it would be far simpler to just maintain a relationship between the member and the dedicated locator, because they typically are regional, right? Even for multi-regional dedicated locator SPs. But ultimately, is it really necessary at that point then for the member to have any type of contractual relationship or agreement, even as far as an NDA, with the project owner, or should that just be strictly held between the DLSP and the member?
So with that, the service agreement, and this is just to give across the board that, obviously we don't have a oversight to this, and we're speaking on behalf of, feedbacks that we get on the industry, right? So just, it is not part of our legislation, but we're just speaking on behalf of the feedbacks that we get. But based on what we see on that, it's mainly between a service agreement between the member and the DLSP, because obviously it's the servicing, how to locate the infrastructure, escalation process, and whatnot. It only ways that certain NDAs and I guess an agreement set up with the project owner, it's really up to the member based on that. But really, there is different ways to look at it, because essentially what you look at is the LSP has a separate contract or agreement with the project owner or excavator. It holds whatever liabilities and what's not in between that agreement. And then from there, there's the LSP and the member. So each individual parties would have their own agreement and liability, and that kind of revolves around to the whole process of safely locating an infrastructure. And if there's a liability involved with that in terms of damages, it covers on both ends onto that. NDA wise, that's also covered within the project side of things. And also that is within the DLSP and the member. You can include that on terms of NDAs, because once again, that information that you're providing the DLSP, that's just information for them to locate the infrastructure, not to provide that information elsewhere or to the project owner. So it is for them just to locate your infrastructure. That answer your question there, Wes?
Oh, that did. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Marco, Reza is here from Rogers. We are experiencing the same. We are sending the DLSP to sign an agreement with structure with utility owner, and next thing they are reaching out to Rogers to sign another agreement on the top of that because they are not comfortable 100% with the DL. They want to get with an agreement with Rogers as well.
Yeah.
Maybe at one point we should address this one way or the other, make it a practice for everyone to do that, or just make the comment that it's unnecessary. Once you have the agreement with the LSP, that should cover all your concerns. Just my thought.
Yeah, no, it's a valid feedback there. Thank you, Reza. Once again, this is our feedback based on what we're hearing in the industry, just like what you're providing right now. It is not part of our legislation in terms of agreements and liabilities and whatnot. So we can only speak on behalf of what we're seeing and what the feedback that we're getting in the industry itself on this. So thank you for that. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Thanks, Marco. The other issue I'm running up against is, I believe this may be unique to the situation I'm in, but the feedback originally from Ontario One Call has been to utilize established DLSP providers. Now, I've got a particular jurisdiction in which we do not have an existing agreement with any of the existing DLSP providers. And the procurement process Cogeco has to go through is lengthy and very, very cumbersome. So it may take us forever and a day to be able to get an existing provider on board for us to be able to utilize their services. Now, that being said, we have an onboarded DLSP prospective provider. However, they feel like they're being roadblocked in trying to get pre-approvals, or they feel like they can't move along in the process, and they don't feel like the process is moving, at least with my conversations with them. So my question's kind of more geared towards, if the industry is looking in the solution to eliminating late locates, or at least mitigating late locates, is this model and having more providers in this model space. What is Ontario One Call doing to ensure that those who are capable or may become capable of providing such services can do so in a streamlined manner, so that those that do have contracts and are positioned to be able to provide these services for existing projects or very shortly starting projects can get through without those projects failing?
So I'll jump in here again. So Rob, you bring up a really valid point, and it is something that obviously we are looking at. There are a number of areas where we see areas of opportunity. The owners of underground infrastructure have various requirements, and obviously at the forefront of our minds, and I think all of our practices, is damage prevention, and we have to go about this in the safe way. Unfortunately, the safe way isn't always the quickest route, but certainly it is something that we're looking at, and perhaps as an industry we need to establish a bit more aligned thoughts in how to move forward with getting dedicated locators, or LSPs, to become dedicated locators. Whereas at the moment, each individual owner has their processes internally and how they do get their LSPs to mark their infrastructure on a daily basis. Having something that's a bit more aligned would be more beneficial for the industry, for sure. So I do look at this and I do see areas of improvement. Unfortunately, it isn't something that's necessarily available for you today, and I appreciate that there may be some frustration with that. But don't go away thinking that we aren't looking at this. We aren't trying to find areas to move this forward and bring more resources into the industry. It is something that is desperately needed, to have more boots on the ground from different companies to help the industry progress. We do know that, and that is something that is being worked on in the background. But again, when safety is at the forefront, it means that we have to have steady progress rather than quick progress.
Thank you for that, Adam. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left into our session here. We don't see any more questions on our board here. Anyone else that want to share their feedbacks, experience, questions on board here? If not, then I can give you back 10 minutes of your afternoon here. We can take this back to our next session again following month that we'll send out an invite for. But once again, our team is available here for any questions. If you need us to step in terms of mediations for any pinning points between members or project owner or DLSPs that you have come across with, just notify our team and we'll jump onto those calls and take you step by step throughout the process of Dedicated Locator. Our main goal here is to, obviously roll this out successfully for everyone, as per utilizing Dedicated Locator. Okay, so it doesn't seem like we have any more further questions. I'll end this session this afternoon. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.